decided to make this video in the vain attempt that it might actually help somebody and maybe actually fix my own problem at the same time. I guess I've got nothing to lose. So what you're looking at is half of a Ricoh Theta V, which exploded when it fell off the roof of my car by accident. I do have other bits and pieces of it. I was fortunate enough that it landed on the tip here, but it was attached to a monopod, the weight of which split the whole thing in half from the base. The lenses were intact. Again, I was fortunate enough to claim on my home contents insurance, which, apart from the excess, paid out for a replacement, which was very lucky. And I kept the bits. I did offer them to somebody. They never came forward to take them, so I've still got them. And I'm glad I have, because just a few days ago, whilst out on a family walk, my replacement Theta V fell over and chipped the lens on a small piece of gravel. So this is what one looks like when it's taken apart, with also some bent and broken parts missing. I'm going to attempt to show you how to do a lens swap. I'm going to start the video because I'm doing this handheld, and I'm also doing it on the end of the dining room table. I'm not a professional YouTube video person, so please bear that in mind. A little bit of background about me. I've got 20 years in IT. I've been taking laptops apart since I can't remember when, so I'm fairly confident with ins and outs and workings of the components of electronics. I'm not an electrician or an electrical engineer. I don't understand what diodes do properly. I get the basics, but I'm fairly confident when taking things apart, especially when I know I've got nothing to lose. But one thing I can help you with is a little tip, is when you're working on projects like this, taking iPhones apart or other phone screens, try and work on a sheet of A4 paper or something bright, so that when you drop screws, you can actually see them. And then once you've taken a group of screws out, put them together in a group so that you know which component they came from. Depending what I'm doing, if it's a new project, I will actually have a spare sheet of paper and I will lay the screws out in an order or in a pattern that they actually come out of the device in, so that I know which screw goes back where. So far, apart from the silver screws here, all the screws have been the same size, so it shouldn't really be an issue. Several times in the video I mentioned that the screws all appear to be the same. As I'm reassembling, I'm found out that this is actually incorrect. This is a spare screw left over from the original donor unit, and this is the original screw from the tripod mount. As you can see, they're just ever so slightly thinner, so make sure you save the thinner, shorter ones for the tripod mount. So it turns out that making YouTube videos on the fly isn't as easy as it looks. I've now actually completed the repair. I'm just about to put the battery in and screw it together and test it. However, before I did that, I'm actually going to include all of the footage that I've shot, so that you can see the mistakes I've made and things not to do by trying to take shortcuts and hoping it works. So essentially, it just looks like there's two screws that hold the lens in. One here and one underneath this unit. This unit comes out very easily and then unclips from here. Then that makes the lens wobble, but the lens is actually held in by two ribbon cables, which are difficult to get to from the side here. I first started by bending this piece out of the way, but subsequently found that actually trying to refit the ribbon cables after the replacement was very difficult, so I needed to do the ribbon cables from the main board. To get to the main board, I had to remove this section, which also includes this screw and this screw here. Both of these screws are integral to hold, well, certainly this screw holds on this side. Once this side's open, it makes the job a whole lot easier. So yes, there is potentially a shortcut depending on how nimble and small your fingers are, but I would recommend removing the whole system and doing it properly. And I'm going to put this piece of video at the start so that you've got, when you're watching it, it kind of makes sense even though you see me mess it up. So this is my new / replacement, and you can just about see here, this is the stone chip, and it shows up as a dark patch in the video or any pictures that are recorded. So the first step you do in taking apart is to actually remove this label from the bottom of the device. You need to be careful because this, obviously, as you know, is your Wi-Fi joining code, so you don't want to destroy the label or damage it in any way. You need to keep a reference of it. It may be a good idea to take a picture of it before you start taking it off in case you tear it. Once you've taken this label off, it will reveal 4 small screw holes here next to where the tripod mounts, but you only need to take off the top 2. As I found out, I've taken out all 4 and I only needed to take off the top 2. In order to get the case off, here's one I did earlier, I've used a craft knife. This is a Swan Morton scalpel blade number 10, and I started along this side here. I'm going to show you how I started. Right, so unlike other YouTube videos where they previously take the machine apart and then say, oh, all you need to do is this, and they make it look so simple, off camera I've just re-clipped this back together. I don't know if there's a correct order to take this apart, but I do know that I've successfully taken it apart, and I started in this corner, and if you look closely you can see a couple of small chips. Okay, so I went in with the blade here and I just pushed the tip of the blade in and wiggled it up like this, and then put my fingernail in it to give it a bit of a gap, and then push the blade in a little bit more. You have to be careful not to push the blade in too far, otherwise you might cut one of the plastic lugs off or damage the internal mechanisms. So here we go. There we go, there's the first pop. So I'm just going to hold that open with my fingernail, put the tip of the blade in, work my way along. Second pop. Now I've got to the button and I'm going to stop here. I'm going to hold it open. I'm going to go to the other side. Starting at the bottom. And once you get that first section open, the rest of the unit becomes quite loose. So I'm halfway open. As you can see, it comes open. Now I'm going to work down the side without the buttons. Okay, so that's open. It's just the button side to come back, and it just popped off. All of the lugs are intact. Just be mindful that on this edge, which is the non-button side, the third lug is slightly lower down than all the rest. There is also one at the very top, if the camera would focus. There it is, right in the top of the middle. Now, the next stage might be a lot more complicated because my other unit has a lot of bits missing from it, which flew out across the car park when it broke. So I do know that the lens unit itself is held in by 2 screws, but it also is held in by some other ribbon cables. So we need to release those cables first. And I think in order to do that, I'm demonstrating with the other unit. I have removed the 2 screws from the other unit, which are here and here. The screw attached to my screwdriver. Yeah, so here and here. But then there's a ribbon cable on the side here and one on the other side which connects to the main board. Other than that, it's actually loose. But in order to get to the ribbon cables on the side, I need to remove this side frame. And this is just the, I don't know what this part is, probably something to do with an antenna or just general protection. But on the good unit, it's actually a plastic frame. So that frame needs to come out first. The next stage is to remove the battery, of course, before we start fiddling with any electronics. So the battery is held down by a bit of double-sided sticky tape, just a small square on the back of the battery. I use the screwdriver blade to lever it up from the button side very gently, not putting too much pressure on the side plastic. Once you've got the top open, this top section is loose. It just sits down on the frame. You can lift it up and it's on a ribbon cable that's folded into the main board. There is a small latch here which you flip up and the ribbon cable pulls out. So as I said, I'm going to be chopping up this video and doing it in sections so that there's not 3 hours worth of you watching me undoing various screws. I've never taken one of these apart before other than right now in this depth, and what I've discovered after getting quite a way into the video is something that will be very useful to you potentially early on. So in order to without jumping ahead too much, in order to get the lens assembly back together, you need to remove this plate. Okay, and early in the video I talk about removing this sidebar, but at the bottom it gets stuck. It turns out that there's 2 screws down here, one either side, and if you remove those and then remove this plate, it reveals this lug which is part of the sidebar. And that's what's holding the sidebar on, which then also releases this metal strip so that you can then actually fully remove the sidebar without worrying about stressing it or breaking it. Right, so a little bit of tinkering off camera has revealed that there's a bit of an issue and I don't want to push it. This side piece here, which needs to come out so that we can get to the ribbon cable, doesn't want to come away at the bottom. The plastic frame is held in by these little pins inside these grey circles which go down over the pins. However, there is a metal strip which you saw on the previous device which seems to be holding it in place. So what I've done is I've lifted the side frame from the top lens area away from the unit and it takes the metal strip with it. Then carefully separate, lifting, leaving the metal strip behind because you don't want to bend it. The first 3 come undone pretty easy. A little bit of a lift and a wiggle for number 4, and then number 5 just does not want to seem to move. And I do not want to bend this strip because I'm not quite sure of the importance of it, but it must be there for a reason. But if you look closely, the lugs seem to connect and go through it. But either way, just bending it out of the way enough here, like this, bending it out of the way is enough, I think, to get this ribbon cable and pop the clip on it. There you go, clip's popped. Now that ribbon cable will come out. Okay, one of the benefits of recording this in stages and then hopefully stitching it together later is that I can flip backwards and forwards from the old model to the new model to learn the construction and the best way to take bits and pieces apart without damaging what is essentially my good camera, which, although with a mark on the lens, is still a working camera. What I've ascertained from having a little play is that the lens needs to be free in order to be able to get to the ribbon cable properly, and also you do need this side plastic off. So in order to get the plastic off, which I haven't been able to do successfully, what I've worked out is that I can make sure this is on camera. There's some small holes in the plastic and they lift over and they sit down onto a little black peg, okay, and that holds it down when it's sandwiched between the frame. But I don't want to bend this metal strip any more than I need to because I'm not quite sure on the importance of it. So what I've done is I've bent the plastic away and then gently lifted the pins over the top. I get down to pin number 4 and then pin number 5 just does not want to move. So I've gently pushed the metal out the way and I can get to the ribbon cable from this side now. So before I go ahead and attempt to undo the ribbon cable, I'm going to loosen the lens assembly with the top screw here and the bottom screw here. And that should allow me to lift the lens up a little bit so I can get the ribbon cable out. Okay, there's only one thing worse than a boring YouTube video, and that's watching someone take screws out of something really slowly. So all I've done is unscrew these two with a 0 Phillips head screwdriver from my multi-tool kit, and as you can see the lens assembly is now loose. So I'm going to attempt to go ahead and flip up this black. See, it comes up and round. There's not enough room for that to come round once it's still inside the body. That should then release the cable so that I can pull the cable out. It's very difficult to do and keep it in shot. Here we go, it's come away. Okay, so now on to the next side. Now that one side is free, the other side lifts up much easier, and I'm going to just flip this with my fingernail so I don't risk cutting the cable with a knife. Bam, lens assembly out. Now when I first dropped my old camera, I did piece it back together and try and hold it together and attempt to use it. It was so long ago I can't actually remember what the upshot was. I think it was still working. I think I could still see through the lenses. So I'm going to attempt to put this back together and hope that actually my old lens unit is still working and still intact. If it doesn't work, then well, I can always reassemble the old lens, and if it doesn't work, then I've lost 2 cameras potentially. I don't think I'd be able to claim on insurance twice, but what I really hope is that I've helped somebody else fix their unit somehow. So the reverse assembly will be the exact opposite of the disassembly. So we'll start with the ribbon cable closest to the buttons. There's not much movement in here, so this is going to be very fiddly. Even just getting the ribbon cable into your fingers is hard work. Obviously I don't want to touch the lenses. I don't want to scratch the lenses on the other bits of plastic. This is not easy. I'm going to do this off camera and then I'll come back and show you how I did it. Okay, so two things happened whilst I was attempting to put the lens in. This is the dead unit. Firstly, this little metal picked off at the top here. So if you find a piece of metal on your desk, it sits over the top there. Okay. Secondly, I should have pointed out that this lens only goes in one way up, and that's with the socket here facing up, that way around. Okay, so how I got the cable in was, well, just pointed it in the wrong way up. It's still the socket facing up, but I was just holding the lens upside down. So I held the cable out with my fingers and thumb like this, and then went in from the top and pushed it in. You feel a little click as it goes in, and then you sandwich the clip shut, and then it's down. That one doesn't look like it's down exactly correct. Not sure if I caught that on camera or whether it was out, because I was looking at the lens rather than the camera. So I'm just going to go for that again. So I held the ribbon cable with my finger like this, and I pushed the lens towards it with the flap open. You feel a little, you can feel it locate when it goes in, and then you just push the clip down, and then that's in. So then it's just a question of reassembling the other side. Okay guys, so this hasn't gone to plan. It's exceptionally difficult trying to get that second ribbon cable back in there because of the movement. It's okay to remove it because you're just pulling against the cable, but trying to get the cable flat back inside with your fingers, there's just not enough room in there. Maybe if you were very careful with some non-serrated pliers, like a snipe nose plier with a non-serrated end, you might be able to sandwich the cable and push it in with the tip of the pliers. But it's just not going in for me, the angle I've got. So I'm going to attempt to remove this section here and see how I get on with finding the other end of the cable, and then potentially reinserting the cable into the lens and then putting it back into the main board. So I've used a 00 Phillips on this little single screw here. Although this looks like a screw, it's not a screw. This board is then loose. I'm then going to go for the two silver screws down the side of this green board. The green board lifts away from its housing once you move this ribbon cable. However, the green board, if you try and flex it, will easily ping off from its very small connector on the underside. So if you do ping the green board off, you just have to wiggle this brown cable out of the way from underneath this silver piece here, and then stretch it out, and then lift the lever and flip the cable back in. I've removed the two screws from the bottom here, but so far no movement on the main section. So I'm going to go for the rest of the screws surrounding this unit here and get back to you. So a couple more screws out and we've got some movement here, but there's one more screw down the bottom here. So far these internal screws have all come off nicely with a 00 Phillips. And there's another one on the other side underneath the sticky pad. Sorry, I said I wasn't going to do screw removal on camera. And then this unit lifts out and it takes the bit of metal with it. Now I don't know whether that came out because it was broken or because it was being located down with the plastic. Aha! So here we can see a piece of plastic which was actually screwed down through here, which holds this sidebar on that I was struggling to release earlier. So if you do want the sidebar off, take off the metal casing first and undo this, otherwise you might break it. As you can probably see now that I've taken this one off, this other piece of plastic which was from the other sidebar, which I've completely lost, has now just come away. So this is now revealing the main board, and we have two ribbon cables that go back underneath to the main board, and this is like a sachet of heat transfer paste in a plastic wrapper, which is obviously taking the heat over to the main heatsink here. So peel that away, remove your ribbon cables from the main board, reassemble to the lens housing, clip back in, reassemble. I'll try and do that on the good unit and see how far we get. Okay, so in order to make sure we don't damage our replacement lens, I'm just going to unclip this one and pop it to one side. Before I continue to disassemble the good unit. Now I'm just going to follow the same simple steps. I'm going to unscrew this one here, the two silver ones at the back, this black one, silver one here at the side, and there's another black one here, and then the two black ones at the bottom, which will release this side unit. So, in a previous recording, when I got to this stage, I managed to remove the green board from the brown cable here. So I'm just going to use a flat bladed screwdriver and gently get the screwdriver underneath the brown cable and lift it just so it comes away as one piece. Once it's up, a little bit of glue behind it, I think. Yeah, double-sided tape, just holding that brown pad down. A bit of double-sided tape here, so you just need to get underneath here. Obviously not too sharp, nothing that's going to damage it, and just peel it back, and that will keep the unit out of the way. So now you can see the silver screw here that we're going to go for. Silver screw here. So we've removed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 screws. Then we're going to peel back this blue heat transfer, and we can see the ribbon cables. So I'm going to take them both out. I'm going to reassemble the lens with the ribbon cables in it, and then I'm going to screw the lens in so it doesn't wobble about whilst I'm reassembling everything else. So it's important to remember that this lens assembly is not double-sided in terms of it will only go in one way up. You've got this assembly here, which is the top, and then this is the bottom. You can see there's a little cutout notch on the top side. It's harder to see on camera. When you look at it directly here, they look both the same. When you see it, it's visibly different. And if you look at the bottom assembly, get this to focus, point it in the right direction, there is actually a cutout in this slot here, and the cutout is the up face. Okay, and then when reassembling the cables, if the up face is facing towards you, the ribbon cables are labelled C1 and C2, and C2 goes on the button side when it's facing towards you. Okay, so I realised I managed to do the last piece of that without being on camera. So C2 with the lens facing up away from you, C1 on this side nearest to you. Done it again, clipping it in so they come round, and the base of the ribbon cables, when you fold them flat, are to the base of the camera. and C2 is on the button side of the main board. So I've reinserted the top screw and the base screw for the camera, making sure that this metal bit is still intact, with C2 on the button side. I'm now going to attempt to insert the ribbon cables back into the main board. Okay, so after a bit of fiddling off camera, I've decided that this side cable, which I was moving out of the way earlier, which comes in here, comes out the side, was getting in my way. So I just lifted the catch here and carefully removed the cable. It's very fiddly getting these cables back in. You will notice that there's a straight line here. Once the cable is back in place, it lines up with the top of the main board. And that way you know that your cable's in straight and not crooked, which would give poor communication between the camera and the main board. So on to number 2. Okay, so as you can see, cable 1 and cable 2 are back in, and both of the lines line up with the top of the motherboard. You can see that they're slightly out towards the top here, but once the heatsink unit is pushed back in, this will pull the cables in nicely. See, there's a little bit of curvature there, but they do flex. So the next thing to go back in would be this little side ribbon cable. Okay, so the side ribbon cable's back in. I straightened it out, pushed it in flat, and then latched it over. Then the heatsink pad goes down, back over the top where it was. And then this next section may well be quite fiddly, because this unit needs to go back in, but also this side plate needs to go back in at the same time, and one stops the other. So I'm going to start with putting the side unit in, like so, and then place the heat unit on top, wiggling it through the connectors. It's lined up at the bottom, however the top section is being held up by the ribbon cables themselves, which are sitting proud. Just hold them back and then it all drops in place. So reassembly of the screws for this unit, remembering black at the bottom, silver on this side, black over here, 2 silver ones down the side and a black one in the top. Okay, so earlier on in the video I mentioned that all screws seem to be the same. Actually, I've just done reassembly. I've come to the realization that the one that goes down the side here is actually a shorter machine screw compared to the other longer silver ones. Also, it's worth noting that the majority of the components that you're screwing into are other pieces of plastic. So whilst the screws need to go in tight, you don't want to over tighten them and strip the plastic. Okay, so all back together. 1, 2 silver screws, third machine silver screw, and then 1 black screw here, 1 here, and 2 at the bottom. Now it's time to reinsert the top unit. It goes across here. So reassembly of the ribbon for the top section. This just goes in, little wiggle, push the clip down, and if it's tight, it's done. Now, if you're watching the earlier video very closely, you'll have actually noticed there was a little bit of these gold contacts sticking out of the clip before I removed it. So I've just reviewed that video just to make sure that I've pushed it in far enough, because I was unsure myself. So yes, you are supposed to have a little bit of this sticking out. Then it's just a question of tucking this part down inside the frame and then feeding it along the top and placing the top in by gravity as it was originally held. And there we have it. Next stage is to reinsert the battery. So the battery, double-sided sticky tape there, terminals, and the terminals for the battery. Pretty obvious how that goes in. That's in. And then it should be just a question of clipping the frame back on, starting with the top. Just snap together really nicely, and then reinserting the 4 screws at the bottom, followed by the sticky pad. Okay, so once all your screws are in the bottom, it's time to put the label back on. Unfortunately, this was held on with something, I have no idea what, but it doesn't stick back on, so you're going to need some double-sided tape, or I probably wouldn't recommend glue, but strong double-sided tape to put it back in. And for the moment of truth, it's on. Now let's see if it connects to the unit.